Kung Fu Panda 4, a movie where we would be shown back to Terran Lung and a new character, a bitch called Zhen. Well, what would I tell you that on the internet? There's a story which would tell us that Zhen existed and that she was a prostitute from Japan, that she emigrated to China to continue with her work. She would arrive in this country, and to her misfortune the place of work would kidnap her. The owner of the place, who was called the Chameleona for having multiple appearances when she did her actions, would take her to a dungeon when, as soon as she entered his office, a big man named Tai Lung would take her there and then grope her while calling her a bitch. She met different people who would be in the same situation. As time went by, everything became worse. The clients, the ones that Chameleona brought, were the most disgusting. Plus they had very strange fetishes which ranged from disgusting to having sex with the ladies while they pretended they were dead. Zhen would always dress like what they called a slut. She would suffer harsh punishments for not complying with the client's orders, and once one would almost try to kill her. She would be saved by one of her companions whose name was Tigress. Both would form a relationship which would become stronger and stronger, although all that would change when the chameleon would separate them and punish them both by making Terran Lung and another guard called Shift begin to abuse them. Terran Lung would take the Tigress to a separate room and Shift would stay with Zhen. He would grope her and then he would take out his member. He would rub them all over Zhen's face until she turned her face. He would try to open her mouth using his hands. Although since he couldn't, he decided to use a device which would make Zhen do it. So Shifu would make her eat his member. After a few hours of aloneness torture, he would take a hammer and break her hands, and he would strip her naked while she resisted. Shifu would then do what he had to do, and after a few hours he would get tired. He would know that this was not enough and that he should continue torturing her. So he would come back. He was going to take the hammer and put it into Zhen. He would like it too much, and that's why he would start. This was not enough, so he decided to raise the level. He would then decide to put the hammer through his other hole. Zhen screamed and cried while Shifu was enjoying it while he was preparing to take out the hammer and do it again. While all this was happening, Tai Lung in the other room was hitting and abusing the Tigress, causing her to sometimes choke due to the aggressiveness with which he was towards him. Tai Lung suffocated her, but for this reason he also threw alcohol at her and also cut her with a knife that he had on hand. This way he tortured them for more than 4 days. Unfortunately, the Tigress would die after a week due to becoming pregnant by one of them. The clients, she would be executed by Tai Lung by stabbing her 34 times with a knife while she was already in an advanced state of pregnancy. To Zhen's misfortune, she only found out days later when she received the body in the bed of her room. Later she would be forced to have sex with her and with a client with that type of fetishes. It is known that they ground the body of the Tigress and gave it to pigs to eliminate it. Also, Zhen in that act with the client would have to do, since he took advantage of the Tigress's organs to rub them on his body while making monkey noises. It is known that he would also use the Tigress to touch him with his hands and would also use the intestines to give Shen a kind of oral while they wrapped around his member. Zhen would try to kill himself several times, but he couldn't succeed. Almost all the workers were watched 24 hours a day, and there were also cameras in everyone's room. One day new workers would enter who they called Viper and the Old Goat. The Old Goat was a lady who would enter that place by mistake, since Terran Lung would trick her into entering so she could be covered from the rain. This was a street dweller who was almost 80 years old. So the Chameleona would know that she should use her as a reason for her clients to pay more money. Not much is known about her, although it is said that a man with serious mental problems who was bisexual, that she would dress like a panda and do all kinds of things to it. It is said that the corpse would look so badly long and Shifu would be disgusted with treating it. The chameleona also works with clients, although she chose the least aggressive and most harmless ones. She charged a fee. Great money for his service. It is also known that he tortured clients and also that he also liked to have sex with animals. Zhen would become friends with the viper and the same would happen with the tigress. They would become very close and would not be discovered since they would create a code in order to communicate which was almost undetectable. It is known that the place would operate as a sewn place sometime later and that Zhen and the others would have to work to maintain it. All of this happened on the day because it was very well known. Well, at night it was operated in the same way as before. Zhen would not last long in a good state, and the torture and clients were getting worse and worse. He even once had to roleplay with a man who thought he was a child having to breastfeed him, while he bit her and cut her to suck her blood. But the unhappiness was not only for the employees, but also for the clients. Anyone who did not pay would have to work until they paid their debt. It is known that for this they would close the place several times, although the chameleona would almost always move her employees to different places for this reason. The viper was known to get cancer and that one of the most horrible jobs she had to do was suffocate a man working until he died. The man was called the Mantis because of his size. He would die for this and his body would be used like the others, giving more than one of the clients all kinds of illnesses which would make them make several demands, but none of them would come to anything. One day a man would arrive who would make Zhen end his life. This man called himself, because he was someone quite aggressive and fat man. It is known that he asked Zhen for her size and that besides all of them she was the one he was most attracted to. After this Zhen would be dressed in her suit and that night everything would happen normally, until the Po would take out a cane and start hitting Zhen, and this he would introduce her with a cane, tearing her from the inside. She would also suffocate her and then he would begin to satin her. As always, she would try to defend herself and for this reason, he would tear off one of her ears. After this, he would tie her to the bed and continue marinating her. Then he would take her out. He took a chainsaw from his bag and with this he would begin to cut off her legs and eat them, leaving her alive, and also abusing her in the process with what is known to be a duck and a turtle. So Zhen would decide to hang himself after this. When everything would end, it is known that all the culprits were sentenced to death, especially the chameleona, who would be killed by the local prisoners. It is also known that Po and the others would be arrested, but would die for following their fetishes. It is also known that there is more places like this which the chameleona manage which are still not found.